Okay, so we are going to do the great Rhino to SketchUp experiment, the best way to prepare your Rhino file to export into SketchUp. I do not advise doing this, and I do not recommend using SketchUp. Rhino is clearly a superior tool, but for those of you requested, they were having some issues when they brought it into SketchUp. Things were meshing together and they weren't getting what they wanted in the SketchUp file. So we're going to test out a couple different options and we will see what's going to work best. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to keep it really simple. Let's have a rectangle, so normal poly surface, and we're going to make a curve. We're going to make another rectangle, but this time, since this person was having conflicting, I think their geometry was meshing together and they didn't want it to do that. So we're going to try and we'll make this into a group. So that is a grouped object, and we'll command paste. So we have two group objects that are meshing together because we want to see how those are going to interact. And then finally, we're going to do an object that is a block. So let's do this and sphere. No, let's just do another rectangle again. So we're going to call this one a block, and we're going to make each one a block. So we're going to type in block, select the base point. We're going to do block, select the base point. Okay, so I think those are the three main types of geometry. I guess we could try a mesh, although meshes are, could try a mesh, might as well. Here, let's go here. Let's try mesh. Why not? Mesh. Select surface. It wants me to select. Okay, then we have a surface. Okay, so then the next circumstance is we're going to have a surface and we're going to overlap those surfaces, because SketchUp does not like when geometry overlaps, or it immediately ties those together. And then we're going to do the same thing with, we're going to make these into meshes and see how those do. So let's make this slightly different so we know that, yes, that was our mesh. And we'll just type in mesh and it will come up how many polygons. Okay. All right, so now we're looking, we're going to delete our surface. So we're just looking at a mesh and see how that translates. All right, let's see what happens when we export. So I'm going to select all. And I'm going to go File, Export Selected. Online I was reading people were exporting as a DXF, and I was not having success doing that, but I was having success for just exporting as a SketchUp file. So I'm not sure why they were recommending that, but here we go. These are my files that I was using to test all this out. So we'll just do version 6, and let's bring it into SketchUp. Now I am working with SketchUp 8 because I have an older version. Don't want to pay for the new version. Okay, so we're gonna go, instead of doing open, we could do both, but I'm gonna do import for right now and do version 6. Open just opens up a new file. Now let's see how this shakes out. So it's all already in one group. That's when you import it, that's what happens. This is just a pretty standard, it's now SketchUp geometry. But now what's interesting is, so this is, these are nested together, but if we wanted to, we could just do, we could just group these together, make a group, and then we wouldn't have the issue of it being live. However, if you have a lot of complex shapes, you can see our blocks are grouped separately, and so they're not going to mesh together, which is what the person commenting on my other video was, I think, was trying to get at, was how to automatically put these into groups so you don't have to worry about double clicking and making it into a group. So that's that. I hope that should answer that question. You can see that this is, this is why I don't like SketchUp. It goes to dealing with line segments, and that, to me, that's just messy. And then here, let's see, when we move this, it's basically, you see how it's sticky. That's why I don't like SketchUp. It's sticky. And then let's see how our meshes looks like they act pretty much the same. Except for right now, the line is not getting bifurcated, but I bet once we move, so if we select one of these lines, I think it's gonna be a similar thing. Once we move this, let's see, now it bifurcates it once you move it. One last thing, actually two last things that I want to show is dealing with the segments in SketchUp, and then also understanding the import. So with SketchUp, this is one group, and if you import file import, let's import an older version I was dealing with, you're importing into that group. So I think that's helpful to understand and know that now you're a group within a group. And so generally in SketchUp, you basically want to always be making things into groups, which is why, another reason why I don't like SketchUp. So the last thing is line segments and sides. So you see in this bottom area here, let's see if I can get this to move up. There we go. So you can see here it says sides, and this is important. So right now I had 1,000 sides, which is a lot. And let's say I made this again here, the same semicircle, and I'm just gonna do sides before I type anything. If I just type in 25 sides and then I make my geometry, it didn't change it. It's still coming up as, so 5, let's do 25 sides. I wonder if I have to press enter. I think once you've locked it in, now it has all the sides, because if I go to circle sides, I don't know if you can, 25. Yeah, it's not doing it, but I think for all of you SketchUp users, you'll probably notice sometimes when you make those curves, you're gonna see every segment. So let's say 50. You see how it's starting to get more and more segmented as I get larger and larger. And I think right now it's just because I set it at 1,000, it's not going back. But yeah, if you would make this really, let's see, you can see all those segments. Let's see if we can draw freehand. No. Draw polygon 50. Okay, so now it's selected 50. Let's see. See how you see those segments? It's terrible. So now to improve that, you can press 1,000 and you get smoother. You should get smoother. All right. That's just a little tip that I found when I was using in SketchUp, but I hope that explains the import-export of Rhino and SketchUp. And pretty good to know that if you do this blocks, you're going to have separate, it's going to treat it basically as groups, which makes sense because blocks in Rhino are basically the equivalent of dynamic components or a group actually in SketchUp. So cool. Hope this was helpful. Have a good night. Bye.